Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 23 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. Today's episode is on research methods and more into research in psychology, and it is the 3rd of April 2020 as I record this. Let's move on to the psychology news section. So, in terms of psychology news of this week, there's actually been a few quite interesting bits. For example, from the British Psychological Society's Research Digest, as I always like to read, and in fact, I have got the April 2020 The Psychologist magazine, which I've actually got to read it. So I've put in the personal update. I've been a tad busy this week. So next week I will hopefully have that for you. So going back to the Researcher Digest, so a really interesting article that I quite liked and something I would encourage you to look at, and I'll retweet it on my Twitter feed at Sci-Fi Whiteley, how psychology researchers are responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is actually quite interesting because what the article says is the world is currently in an unprecedented state of upheaval and uncertainty. They're not kidding about that. As countries fight to minimise the spread of COVID-19 and everyone is adjusting to the new normal, remaining at home practicing social distancing. And the same is true of the psychologists whose work we report on every day at Research Digest. Labs have been shut and experiments have been suddenly put on hold in the wake of the pandemic, but many psychologists have also begun launching new research to understand how the present crisis is affecting us and to inform our response to us. Yes, and then it goes on to some stuff. But I had a quick look at this article, and to be honest, this is probably the only news I'm going to be talking about, because the only other one it's about dreams. It's the only other interesting one which I'm going to talk about. I'm probably actually going to do an episode on it, a podcast episode, because it is quite interesting, to be honest. So going back to how researchers are dealing with COVID-19, many things that they spoke about, because it was quite a long article, is that they spoke about this really interesting experiment, which was about social media sharing. And yes, and there were two messages. There was a utilitarian one. This is when you say that you need to stay at home because it's the right thing to do, it's moral and all, and think of the negative consequences of it. And then there was the other one, which I forget the technical name of. There's so many technical names, and sort of my mind's like a jumble of technical names at the moment because of wait till the personal update to hear why. And it was about moral duty. So it's your duty to stay at home to protect your community. And what they found is that people were more likely to respond positively and share the message, if it was about their duty, and not when it was compared about the thing of the negative consequences, which I think just goes to show that. Well, this also goes into thinking biases, like the framing effect. The framing effect, which says that the way how you frame it impacts how people think about it. But that's the gist of it. Yes. So it just shows that when people are faced with a pandemic and as dire as the situation is, we all want to remain positive, and that we all want to think that it is our duty to protect others, which, as people and as citizens, it is. We are all in this together, so we should all protect each other. Yeah, so that was quite interesting. And then the other bit that I wanted to get onto was about how my university is dealing with it, because I have had so many, because of the way how it was, as part of our degree, we have to take part in RPS, which is Research Participation Scheme. So we need to take, so us, and this is pretty much how all universities work, is that we need to take part in so many experiments a year to be able to get credit and pass our course and go on to the next year. Basically, that's the gist of it. And usually we have to get half our credits from lab studies, half our credits from online studies. I basically just try and get all my credits from lab studies, because The online questionnaires are so boring. I mean, it's mind-numbing. It's mind-numbing. For example, we're meant to get 32 credits. Yes, yes, well, from online and lab studies, but you only get 1 credit per half an hour when you do it online, but you get 2 credits per half an hour when you do it in lab. So I'm just thinking, well, it's a much more better use of my time if I had to go to lab studies, because at least there's a chance they're a bit more interesting, but that's a story for another time. God, the stories I could tell you about psychology research as a participant. Anyway, what was I talking about? Yes, like how they did with it. So what our universities had to do to make sure our experiments can still go ahead is basically move them all online. And I've had tons of emails about saying that I've got the right participation profile, which I'm just thinking, I've got my credits. Leave me alone, please. Yes, that's what I'm sort of like thinking, because I don't want to do that. I just don't. I just don't. Anyway, then, yeah, but I just think that it's really interesting to see how adaptive psychology has been, and I think it's so good that psychology has been able to adapt really quickly to the changes. Because if this goes on, if this goes on for like 6 months, that's tons of scientific knowledge that could be lost or at least delayed. So I think it's interesting, and I think it's very good that we are adapting that quickly. So let's move on to the personal update section. Moving on to the personal update section. So this week is week 3 of the coronavirus personal updates. Well, personal updates during COVID-19 times, and it has been a hard week. But as always, I don't know. Just now that I'm on here, I'm feeling really positive, which is one of the things what I love about podcasting. So it does make me feel a lot more positive. So I'm connecting with people. So it has been an interesting week, and and in front of me I've got about 2, 4, 6. I've got about 8 things like basically I would like to talk about in this personal update. So I really do apologise that the actual content of the episode is really short, because it's nowhere near as long as the other episodes, but hopefully you'll find it useful still, and quite interesting. And the Research in Psychology first edition, the edition will be massively expanded upon in the second edition, which I can sort of like tell you about now. So all of this week I've been very busy typing up my notes. I think no joke, I probably typed up 200 sheets of A4 paper, which is a lot, to be honest. And I don't know, it's really interesting to get to see all the information again. Because some of the topics I do love, it's just some of them I just like. Today I've been typing up my developmental psychology, and developmental psychology, very interesting topic. I would just never ever do it because child development, as much as it is interesting and as important as it is, no, I'm sorry. This is like introduction to language development. Because I had such a traumatic lecture, because of the lecturer, and because of the gender identity, and peers and play. The lecture for those two ones was traumatic. It's completely like knocked down my interest. So, and the thing about typing this all up is that it's just bringing all the memories back and how dry the topic is. But something that I am looking forward to is that once I've done my developmental psychology book, I'll make it a lot more interesting for myself, which means it should be 10 times more enjoyable for you as well. Because if I find it interesting, and I'm just at the end of my tether with with these topics, hopefully you guys shall have a blast. So more on that on the coming weeks. But as I'm also quite glad that I can see like different like books are forming from all of my notes. And it is and yes, that, and it's like quite like interesting. So over the next month or 2, or maybe 3, it really depends, I should be writing, editing, and all that stuff, and publishing a biological psychology book. And these are all second editions. A new cognitive psychology, a new abnormal psychology, or yeah, a developmental psychology book, and a research in psychology book. And then I'll also be doing a brand new clinical psychology book, which I am quite looking forward to it. Be doing tons of box sets from them, so this means that you will get a much better deal compared to if you buy them individually. So that I am looking forward to. Yes, but I do need a break. I do need a break from psychology after all of these notes. So next week I plan to relax and I just plan to write fiction. Mainly, I just plan to write some fantasy about some dragons in my sci-fi fantasy universe. A bit of magic, a bit of Garrow, some dragons. I'm really looking forward to it. And then, what else have I been doing? Yes, actually, I wanted to say to everyone, Thursday of the 9th of April 2020, 12th to Easter Sunday, April 2020, when you can get my Garrow collection at a discounted price from Kobo.com. And the actual promo itself is only in the USA and Canada, but because of how I've adjusted the prices all over the globe, it will be discounted. So if you want to get 3 novellas, so I think it's about 90,000 words on a sci-fi fantasy adventure, then please look it out. And this is on Kobo, so Kobo, and I really hope that you enjoy it. I just love my Garrow trilogy, so hopefully you will too. And that and this a week that I've been doing tons of audio, so I can happily say that the Forensic Psychology book is all recorded, and so is the Psychology of Human Relationships second edition. Saying that, the Psychology of Human Relationships book, I am a bit because I've sort of had to adapt how I do audio because my mum's home and just there's other people in the house, even though I'm saying that and I'm not doing it in my special setup. And this audio should be fine. So I don't know, I'm going to have to think about it. And then I've also been doing my Garrow collection, funnily that it's on promo as well, in audio format and Garrow Galaxy's End in audio, so that I've been doing, but it takes so long to upload 90 tracks twice to 2 different platforms. So I'm glad it's over now, and yeah, that's, and some readers have been asking for quite a while because it's a great deal for customers, and I'm an Audible customer, and whenever I look whenever I look for audiobooks, books like for me, it always has to be above £7.99 because that's the cost of my subscription. So I completely understand why my books, the first one is under that for some reason, and the one is really above that for another reason, even though there's an hour difference. People won't pick up the first because it's not worth good value for money. So hopefully this box set collection will change that, hopefully. It's about 9 hours long, and my narration I think is actually my narration is a lot better than I thought it was. So I'm really proud of that, and I'm definitely a lot more confident around narrating fiction now. So that's something. So going on to the coronavirus bit, because keeping it positive. So hopefully you've been enjoying the bonus episodes. Was the last one at the time of recording was released yesterday, and I did get some, and I did get some feedback for it, and it was all positive. So I'm really glad that you found it useful, and and you got a few more. So the one coming out this Thursday, that will be 5 things to do during coronavirus, and it's all creative things, and it's just, I don't know, it's just important. They're basically important things to keep your mental health up. Moving on to 2 other things is that, one negative and one positive, sorry. Is that this week I've definitely understand why people are angry, because there have been times this week, and this is the first week I've actually felt concerned or scared, if you want to call it, of the coronavirus, because in the UK there's been for about 3 times this week there's been close to 600 deaths in a single day, about 3 days this week, so that's been a bit concerning. 2 or 3 days, but still it's a lot of people. That's been a bit concerning. Yes, but I've also been angry at, I don't know, just tons of different things. But something else that I wanted to but I'm not letting this get me down, because I realise that I've got to remember, and everyone else has got to remember, that the people who aren't doing social distancing and aren't following this are the minority, and we can all, and to be honest, we can all play the blame game. Like, we can always blame governments for not doing enough, we can always blame other people, we can also blame ourselves. But I think just everyone is just cycling between being angry at everyone, to be honest, government, ourselves, friends, family, cats, dogs, bananas, apples. But we've all got to remember that, well, we're all in this together. So, and what does blaming actually accomplish in the short term, or even the long term, to be honest? So let's just stop blaming each other and actually just help each other. just like get through it. So, and then, but one positive I do want to say is that so on Monday I'll be doing one of my favourite podcasts, and she mentioned this brilliant thing about regret. So we're all at home right now, or the majority of us are, and we've got to remember that we only have this set amount of time. And yes, this advice applies more to writers or people, but you've got to remember that is there anything that we want to get done during this social distancing or this quarantine that we just want to get done? Because if you don't do it, will you regret it later? And we're all at home now, so we all have a lot of time, so we can all get stuff done. Hopefully, or we could all probably adapt ourselves to try and get things done. So I think the takeaway message from this personal update is that maybe switch your thinking from seeing this as a negative to maybe, well, you've got this time. What can I do that I've always wanted to get done? Because if I don't get it done now, will I regret it later? So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And as always, feel free to contact me at connorwhiteley.net/contact, or you can tweet me at sci-fi whiteley on Twitter. So let's move on to the content of the episode then. So moving on to the content part of the episode. So now in the next few episodes, we're going to start looking at the research and how research is conducted in psychology. And to be honest, I'm really looking forward to writing a second edition of this book because, I don't know, I think it's, now that I know what I know, I think the first edition is a bit too basic, but people have said that they liked it, so I do quite like the book still. Right, okay, so in this episode we're going to look at research types. So in psychological research, you have two types of research. You have quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative is more like the hard fix. This is when you use data, you will use hard numbers and a fact. So this is the scientific data examples. And the aim of the research is to make universal rules of behaviour. So through this research, you can make rules that apply to all of humanity about behaviour because you want to apply the behaviour to a large group of people. So the focus is on how behaviour is created and shows itself. And as I've already said, quantitative research has a strong emphasis on scientific data, number-based data. And another thing that I quite like about it is that it's objective and it's not subjective to interpretation or emotions. And emotions, as the research is removed from the context and doesn't influence the result as much, because in 2 episodes' time I'm going to be talking about research biases, and it's quite shocking how much the researcher can influence it. So some examples of this research type include experiments, natural experiments. This is when you do experiments in the real world, and then you've got correlational studies. This is when you look at the relationship between two things. For example, I don't know, sales of cheese and obesity levels. I don't know, just a random example. Qualitative. And the aim of this type of research is to develop a key understanding of a particular case or event. So that's a pretty standard definition. What I like to think about it is that you study one particular event and you try and find every single bit of detail about it, and in a response to that, you write really thick, detailed descriptions that you can analyse. And this one has a lot more emphasis on human experiences, meaning, and interpretation, with rich, detailed texts for data that you then analyse. But the problem with this type of data is that it's less objective as the research is part of the research method, and sadly can influence the results. But some of these methods include case studies, observations, focus groups, and interviews. All of these are very valid though, and you can actually get some amazing information from these, because as good as quantitative is, you can't get the experience and the feelings of people, which in terms of behaviour as well, very important. And then as I've already said, you use everything to write a very very detailed description of why the event happened. Yes, and because this was just an introduction to the different research types, that's the end of today's episode. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you want to find more about research in psychology, then please go to connorwhiteley.net/research in psychology. It's all one word. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, please follow me at Sci-Fi Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.